Well, good evening all. We are present today in small numbers. We are a small, relevant group. So please enjoy the time together. And those of us who may see this in a video presentation later on, welcome in absentia. And we trust you find this valuable too. This is in our series of Seminary the Third Age that's been running this month. And we welcome back tonight Max Howland, who led us last week on the relevance of public worship, or prayer in public worship. And tonight he'll take us through a discussion on the relevance of ancient creeds. I'm sure that, and ask the question, are they still credible? I'm sure that we would have a wide diversity of views here in this group. And just having a few words with Max before we started today, I discovered we have a diversity of views on a one-on-one basis, so I expect that goes more widely. Max comes to us with a long history of experience in the church and deep commitment to the Christian faith. He is the convener, is it chairman or convener of the Lay Preachers Committee in South Australia and nationally. And he's just recently, a few weeks ago, run the National Conference of Lay Preachers in Queensland. He is a man with things to say about Christianity and the way we practice Christianity in the church. And we look forward to hearing you telling us about the creeds, Max.
Well, good evening again. Faithful few. So let me begin with an acknowledgement that we meet on the lands of the Kaurna people. We pay our respects to the Kaurna elders, past and present and emerging, and we pray for reconciliation in this land between our First Peoples and all the other later arrivals. And the business of reconciliation will have a passing reference later on in those the document that you've found on your seat. However, the role and place it's called, it hasn't got it up there, but are they still credible? That's a good starting point. The role and the place of creeds in church life. It's not a debate about the creeds. The same as last week was not an in-depth exploration about the theology around prayer. It's a question of their role and place in church life. And the way they are most often used in church life is in public worship. So why do they still matter? And I've got a little brief introductory note here. They matter because the church keeps on using them. So we have to deal with that. That's why they matter. So, to be or not to be, yes. Now, a story. Back in 2019, where the congregation where I'm a member was working through the process of calling a new minister into placement with us, and everything went well, and the minister and the congregation agreed to put up with each other for a few years. And we came in due course to prepare the induction service. And of course there's a spot for the creed. And I knew that there is a statement of faith that's quite often used in uniting church congregations, and which I personally much prefer to the traditional Nicene Creed. So I contacted the relevant officer in the church system for some advice. In the end, I nearly died laughing, but at first, not so, because his reply began with those words: the Nicene Creed is preferred because. This is what he said, or something like that. I can't believe that I've ditched this email. I can't find it anywhere, but I remember it was words along these kinds of lines. Because it is a statement of faith of the church, it is intensely ecumenical, and in it we join ourselves to Christians all over the world. Okay? It wasn't a statement about what it actually says, it's a statement of why it matters in a sense of our belonging. Then I read the second paragraph, which began, "The Uniting Church statement is preferred because." And this is when I laughed out loud, kind of. The Uniting Church statement is preferred, hang on, because it is intensely personal, like personal to the Uniting Church at any rate. It is a statement of who we are as a church and of the things that mark us out as a distinctive people of God, or words along that kind of idea. So there's those two paragraphs, and that was the extent of the message. He quite clearly was saying to me, I'm not going to make your mind up for you, but here are good reasons for both. Now go away and sort it out for yourself. And that was fine. I actually was very pleased that he just to have said those two things. And we ended up using the Uniting Church statement, but that's by the by.
Max, could I ask a question? Who was this person that was giving you this advice?
He was the...
what was his position?
He was the, effectively, the presbytery minister. So the regional council that our church was a part of, geographically. Yeah. So, yeah, by the way, the Uniting Church statement is not a creed. The only statements that are allowed to be given that name are the ones that are like the Nicene and the Apostles, the ones that go right back, that were agreed by the whole church. And there haven't been any since about 420 or so AD. But anyway, so the Nicene Creed, and I'm going to pick on that one because I could have chosen 2 or 3, I suppose, but I'll pick on that one because it's the one that has the big name. There are, of course, 2 creeds that the church commonly uses. The other one is the Apostles' Creed, which is superficially similar to the Nicene, but it has a lot less detail in it. The Apostles' Creed evidently was originally used as a teaching tool for new members heading towards baptism. The Nicene was drawn up to address a particular problem in a specific time and place. That is, the Emperor Constantine's need or desire to keep his restive empire under control. In the late 3rd and the early 4th centuries of the Common Era, the empire was so extensive that keeping those uncouth colonials under control, and a whole heap of the locals for that matter, was proving to be quite difficult. So Constantine looked around to see who or what could be co-opted in pursuit of his goal. And what non-government entity did he spy that spanned the whole empire? The church. I know, he said. I'll use the church to draw everyone together in one big community. Except that by this time, for the best part of 100 years, there had been disputes within the church about the nature of Jesus. Vicious disputes. In one celebrated case, a whole bundle of Christians had been arrested at a time of persecution and shoved into one dirty great big cell, and they had to hang blankets up on a rope to divide the cell into 2 parts so that the 2 warring factions of Christians could not see each other, arguing over this business of the nature of Jesus. In the last years of the 3rd century, things came to a head with a dispute between Arius in one corner and Alexander, I think it is, in the other corner, and later on in support of him, a guy called Athanasius. Constantine wanted to use the church to bind the disparate elements of his empire together, and to his dismay, the church itself was being torn apart. What's all this got to do with it? And the creed and everything? He had a political problem. He tried to use the church to fix his political problem. That's what it's got to do with everything. Constantine called a council of the whole church. They met in 324 CE in the town of Nicaea, and the adjective Nicaean gets anglicised to Nicene or Nicene, to try and use the church to pull things together. A couple of things though. Of the 100 or so bishops who turned up, only 2 were from the quote-unquote Western Church, the church based in Rome and dealing with places north and west of that. All the rest were from the Eastern Church, which was based in Constantinople, in what is now Greece. One story is that Constantine locked them all up in the palace where they were meeting and told them they would be released only when they had come to an agreement about the matter in hand. And he also, it is said, posted an armed guard just to ensure that everybody got the message. Constantine himself made no secret of the fact that he thought this whole argument was a heap of time wasted over a trivial matter, which strikes me as odd. Even I reckon it was a pretty important matter, dealing with the question of just exactly who Jesus is. That's a pretty important question. And in the end, so it is said, he proposed a solution according to one story, and more or less demanded that the council agree to it. The solution, of course, was this dreaded word, homoousios. It comes into our English translation as of the same substance. The Father and the Son are of the same substance. And the dispute has come down in popular history as a rancorous argument between this bloke called Arius and his bishop in Alexandria, and later that character Athanasius. So long as everybody argued from first principles, including quoting scripture, there was a complete stalemate, because both sides could easily and equally quote scripture to back up their position. Proof texting goes back a long way, doesn't it? For every quote that the conservatives brought out to defend the divine status of Jesus, Arius was easily able to find a counter text to support his non-conservative position. In the end, the forces of conservatism prevailed because they hauled this word, homoousios, in. And Arius had no answer to that one and was declared defeated, and the Creed of Nicaea, more or less as we know it, emerged. There's 2 problems with that word. Well, at least 2 anyway. In saying that the Father and Son are the same in a fundamental way, specifically that the Son is divine in exactly the same way as the Father, there's a problem if you can't come to terms with that. It's hardly a trivial matter, and it's been a cause of dispute ever since. and the supporters of this side or that side in the first 100 years or so, first this lot were excommunicated and driven into exile, then that lot were out and the first lot came back, and then the situation was reversed, and that happened 2 or 3 times in 100 years as all the arguments around this business went on. But the real problem is that the term does not appear anywhere in the Bible. It's a term lifted from Greek philosophy, the notion of form and substance, what things look like and what they really are. A cat is a cat because it has the substance of catness about it. A rock is a rock because it has the substance of a rock about it. Although Jesus looked human, he had the same substance as divine God, and therefore was God. And if it stopped there, you could have a rational conversation, perhaps, about the relationship between philosophy and religion, but it doesn't stop there. This pen is a pen because it has the substance of penness about it. That is to say, this business of form and substance applies to human manufactured items as well as natural things. And from my point of view, that's really where it comes unstuck. But anyway, what we ended up with was the emperor. Here we are. The emperor imposing a term from Greek philosophy to settle a Christian religious dispute in order to serve his political ends. And we are all supposed to accept this as a statement of orthodox belief. Politicians using the church to serve their political ends, whatever will they think of next? If we're not careful, we'll end up with some politician standing in the front of a church holding up a Bible. Upside down, of course. Of course, the plain fact is, all creeds are political. That might come as a shock, and we'll come back to it in a while. But all creeds are political in the sense that they are all prepared in order to address the particular issues of a specific context. For which reason, I don't have any quarrel in principle with the church leaders who drew up the Nicene Creed. I mean, I disagree with some of the things they said, but I don't object to the fact that they did it. They had a problem, they needed a solution, they developed a solution that made sense to them. Good on them. My problem is that 1700 years later, and after all the things we've learnt about how the world works and all the ways our Western European society has gone off in other directions, all the thinking that's been done about the nature of God and an assortment of justice issues, after all of this, we still use this statement from that other time and place. All creeds and statements of faith are put together to address the particular issues of their time. The things needing to be sorted out in the church politics of the day. So if you read Acts chapter 10 from verse 34 on, you'll see Peter preaching to a Jerusalem crowd about Jesus. What happened and what that says about who he is and the new life that is received exactly as it is spent in the service of others. These are fundamental theological convictions, the bedrock of faith, if you like, for that church then. And and for many still. There's the Augsburg Confession. Some people here will know a great deal about that more than I do. But the Augsburg Confession, the founding statement for the Lutheran Church. The Westminster Confession, a similar thing for the Church of England in 1646. That's a fair while ago. The Heidelberg Catechism of 1619, a statement of belief for a lot of Protestant churches. The Scots Confession of 1560 for the Protestant Reformation in Scotland. The Uniting Church, basis of union. Prepared to meet the needs of a new church being established in the last quarter of the 20th century in a socially Western, politically democratic nation next door to the Asian continent. That makes it a political document. It says who the Uniting Church is, or thinks it is, or hopes it is, here and now. And there are other statements that come from the United Church in Canada and from New Zealand, and a couple of them are in the little document on the seats. I don't think anybody suggests that these statements of the last 300 or 400 years should have the status of a creed, that is, everybody should be made to sign up to them or something. And in the Uniting Church, there have been conversations from time to time about how accurate or relevant the basis of union still is. Nobody suggests that it should stand unaltered forever, and if you don't want to change the foundation document, you allow commentaries to be made about it. That's been done. So all of that is leading up to the question, what place do the creeds have in contemporary 21st century worship? In that document, and I apologise for the amount of reading that's in it, it's a fair bit for a Thursday evening, but in there on page 2 you will find that Uniting Church statement of faith. On page 3, the one from the United Church of Canada. On pages 4 and 5, some excerpts from that basis of union, the foundations document of the Uniting Church. There are 15 paragraphs in that document, and I've picked out 3, so it's fairly selective. But I'd be interested to know what you think at some point. If you, I'd be interested to find out how you react to paragraph 5, where it specifically does not say that the scriptures are the Word of God. The title Word of God is used for paragraph 4 and refers to Jesus himself and only him. And there's some other statements there. On page 6, I came across a document called the Lausanne Covenant. I came across that somehow because there's at least one congregation in the Uniting Church that has this as one of its theological reference points. And I'd be interested to hear what you think of what they've written in paragraph 6 of that. And then I've got a copy of the Nicene Creed, or one of the versions of the Nicene Creed. There are several around the place. And then on the back there's something else to think about. So it's 25 or so past 7. We've got a little over half an hour. What I'm suggesting is that we do something similar like last week. I've got on the front page, there are 2 sets of questions. And what I'm thinking I might do is allow 10, 12, 15 minutes for you to talk. Or we could talk all in one big group. There's only 8 of us. Have a conversation without having to divide up. Of the first 4 of those questions in one group, and then the second group of questions a little bit later. But if you would like to have a few minutes just to skim read that stuff and get a bit of a gist of what it's all about, we can do that and have a bit of conversation about what you think of those various documents and which ones are appropriate to use in worship. How's that sound? And one of us, Mr. Chairperson, sir, will try and moderate this mob.
Goodness gracious, that's good. So you want just one group?
I think there's just one group.
Perhaps
We don't need to divide
we should
up.
do a little moving here to get within earshot of each other. Will we meet on this side?
And have we got the mobile mic?
Yeah, we'll get the mobile mic. Do you want it now?
Yeah, then we can just hand it around. And amongst other things that comes out of that, the comments that are made can get picked up on the recording. David, you might move that way a little. That's plenty.
So looking at the first 4 questions, Christo. Do we like or dislike?
Actually, I should come and join that group too, and you can do whatever you need to do with the recording.
It's too political and too down on. They're out of date. Some of them I still think are useful, like the.
Do you want to repeat this conversation?
Pretty simple. We all believe in Jesus. We all follow His word and teachings. If you believe, I think that one in its basicness is one that should still updating some of their words. Like, you don't use thou, these, and that. You use those, and them.
Okay, well, comfortable language.
It's too
Are
political.
these? I have disagreements in principle, basically, and I just pretend that I don't.
Okay.
It's interesting that, Max, you know the point that these were to serve a political need for a sort of a consensus, a unification of disparate groups in society at the time. But in doing that, they excluded a lot of people. The essence of exclusivity. If you didn't believe, you were excommunicated. And any incipient challenges to the orthodoxy in the church at the time was put down violently. There were crusades against Christians, and they sacked Constantinople in the crusades. Absurd things were done, all in the interest of having a uniform orthodoxy. And it seems to me that, notwithstanding the fact that people say, well, we have to believe something, but the more we insist on all believing the same thing, the more we exclude people who have reservations. I'll talk too much, but that's...
I'm a member of the Church of Christ. I defected from the Uniting Church a few years ago.
No.
For no particular reason, but
And I've been brought up into it, and no creed but Christ.
that's the one. That's church was no creed but Christ. So we don't hear about creeds at all. Well,
Okay.
I mean, you've got the different churches, and so maybe some individual churches that stress it, but the official thing is no creed but Christ.
That might be an historical reaction against something
Yes.
like you're describing.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
long ago persecution of people for not sort of towing the party line in
Yes.
particular. Yeah.
And what if we do modernise, let's just use current language. Does this improve the situation?
It's more easy to understand, and if it wasn't so damn long, it would be boring enough not to get anything much mind to. Unfortunately, the attention span of the youth today is pretty long.
Yeah.
I mean, I still enjoy the Apostles' Creed, and I understand it because I've been taught what it meant, what it means. But you sit down to any basic teen or young adolescent, and you say, "Hey, can you tell me about this? What does it mean?" And they'll be like, "Hang on, yeah, what? You don't have the attention span like you used to, and it's not anyone's fault other than everyone's fault. You know, it's our fault, but not our fault. This has just happened. It is a hard thing to understand. It's easy once it's been pulled apart for you. But if you turn around to any youth, tell me what the Apostles' Creed means. They'll I think they'll get the basic of, you believe in God, you believe in Jesus. I think that's about as much as an answer you get. I challenge you all to find someone young in your family and ask them if they go to church or whatever. You know the creed, right? They say it in church, the Apostle Creed or whatever creed you know. Tell me, what does it mean? Pretend you're someone from outer space that's never come to Earth and they've just discovered this stuff called religion or faith. And you'll either know their stuff or they don't, and the part they don't know or understand, you sort of feel sorry for.
I don't go to churches unless I'm invited because my family over the years has been intimately involved in was religion, and I'm always a little bit unsure.
Well,
And
I
I use
invite you to my Discord church. It's non-denominational and we are basically relaxed.
Yeah, but I look at the creeds on newspaper and stuff like that to understand how far where the churches are positioned. So for me, they're a flag, just a flag, and
Nice.
So what was the word?
Like,
a flag,
Yeah,
like a banner
yeah,
or a colour, and just shows you it's, and then also I can modify my conversation.
that does help in the sense of
Yeah,
knowing where you're
and
sitting.
those kind of things. So, but I generally say that, as you say, these creeds are
Old-fashioned.
old-fashioned. So people are going to negotiate with you, but it's good to know where you're negotiating from.
Well, that's right. And that's for me what's the important thing about it, that you actually know what this person believes. I mean, the people who don't believe that, they can make their own creed. You know, I don't see it as a matter of exclusion. There will always be exclusion because people will always differ, and that's a good thing. But it just means that when you go to discuss things, at least you've got a basis. I mean, that's how the Augsburg Confession was written. It was basically the Lutherans trying to bend over backwards to find something absolutely pared down to the basics, so that hopefully the Roman Catholics might be able, they could come to an agreement. As it turns out, the Roman Catholics weren't, in that direction, but it becomes I sort of see it like a crucible of hammers and tongs stuff to try and get to the absolute essence of something, rather than just sort of fluffy, nice statements. Because we can all sit around together and say nice, fluffy statements and nod our heads, but probably not very,
Productive?
no, and it's not honest actually.
Yeah.
You know, it takes away the honesty.
I've got an example where I walk away from a church where I see prosperity gospel specified,
Yeah.
and I know that that could be incompatible with my current, my modern beliefs. So I wouldn't enter that church.
Just I walk away from a church that simply sees Jesus primarily as divine.
That would perhaps,
You know, if they've got a misunderstanding of who Jesus was, which the Coptic Church has to some degree. That's why there was a division with them.
yes. I sort of I went to an Orthodox church if I'm accompanied by someone because of saints and things like that. So you don't want to offend anybody. You can appreciate the artwork, but you don't have to buy into the creed.
Seems to me question 4 is a very good one. It probably affects me. When we are in the church service and the worship leader will say, "Would you please stand and recite the creed?" And there'll be one or other, usually the Apostles' Creed on the screen. And you look around and you find a whole lot of lips aren't moving, and people may be selective and say, "I believe in God." And then as you work down, and you'll say that they won't say, "I believe that Jesus went into hell and rose again," whatever. I find that's with mythology quite impossible to say. So what do? Do you get selected and sort of pretend that you're going along the stream, or don't you?
This is where my dyslexia comes in handy. I can't read signs, so I don't say shit.
An act of corporate solidarity, as the question says, or do you back out?
I'm often said it's when people say it and they're not thinking what they're saying, it's like the singing from the session
It's
last
like
week.
karaoke, isn't it?
But, well, at church they use lots of Hillsong type songs. Some are okay, and others are not so okay, but often I just don't sing. That's my response to that. But for the people singing, I'm sure if you went up to them, do you know what you're just singing? They wouldn't have a clue. They like the music perhaps, and that's what attracts them rather than the words that they're singing.
But that question of how you respond, I mean, and I was saying before we started, we had an example of it in this very space last Sunday afternoon. We had a new minister inducted into this church here, and as part of the proceedings we had the creed, and which one did we have? Nicene. And Maureen can tell you what happened, that she noticed.
Yeah, just looking at that same sort of thing, you look for the people who are speaking opposed to are not. A lot of people parity. Someone who I know to be a minister of the word, just a couple of people down from me, like me, very respectfully, head dropped. And that's what works for me. It's a community thing. It's for other people. I cannot say that because I don't believe it, but I can maintain a respectful presence, respect for what other people believe. And if we have respect for what other people believe, then we can expect them to return the compliment when there's something that we believe strongly in.
And I think that it's not only respecting the people, it is also respecting the people who hammered and tongued this back then, and to say that maybe I've got it wrong.
Yeah.
And I think we all have to say that. Whatever creed we say that, you know, and I mean just the fact that there were so many different creeds, you know.
And that's part of the issue around this, because I just had a quick look. The version of the Nicene that's here is "we believe." There are other versions around that as "I believe." So, and I looked at the others at the front, and they are "we believe." And so the argument that is used, and you can agree or disagree, it's not the point. The argument that is used is that these statements become statements of the community, and one of the things about joining in the saying of them, even if you don't like what you're saying, is that you are identifying yourself with the community and making yourself part of the community. Whereas particularly if it's written as I believe and you don't like it, then you're kind of holding yourself apart from the community. Now that's the argument that's used. Like I say, you can agree or disagree, but that's the argument that's
The
used.
thing about them is being a part of, accepting a part of the community. But I'm also avoiding your position, that if you don't believe it or you don't feel it's right, be respectful. Don't be a hater. Do unto others as you would like done unto you. Thank you.
And nobody's forcing people to say that.
Not
Hopefully
breaking
not.
arms. It's not the Spanish Inquisition anymore, man.
Yes.
Because even to say we rather than I, for me, that's dishonesty, because it's not what I believe.
We do a lot of team building things, and I'm a pro supporter, and if someone started up the pro side, I'd sing along, we're the boys from South Australia. Even though it's entirely nonsensical. Now, we do, I must say,
hasn't been nonsensical.
because I don't
Do you
think
support
we're
them?
respected by our foes and all that stuff. I support them, yeah, but it's a team building thing. You sing it because everybody sings it. And I'm sure that there are a number of hymns, I can think of many, that I would probably sing because it's a good tune and you get roused up, but you look at the words and think, oh God, I don't believe any of that nonsense.
It's quite interesting. We had no creed but Christ there, but we're having a song like it is partially part of the Nicene Creed. We believe in whatever.
I can't believe I can't remember the last time we all recited a creed in our church. So putting the creed aside, I have problems with the Lord's Prayer. I can't say the Lord's Prayer anymore. Our Father in heaven, really?
Yeah.
Three-tiered universe. Give me a break.
Depends on how heaven is, isn't it?
Heaven can be anywhere, bro. Doesn't matter, it doesn't mean in the sky, it doesn't mean on earth, doesn't mean anything, it's everywhere and everywhere. Wherever it makes you joyful, heaven is.
But there's the concept of when we die, we're believers will go to heaven. Up. Right, that's
An alternative.
that doesn't mean anything for me anymore.
Well, Christmas carols too.
Yes, it's really difficult to get a set of Christmas music together over 4 weeks that's not getting repetitive because there's such a limited range to choose from.
With Old Silent Night, I really honestly don't believe that actually happened. Jesus would have cried. I mean, he's laying in a spiky frigging manger full of hay. Wouldn't you cry if you had hay up your ass? Is that Silent Night's BS?
It was written by a priest who didn't have kids.
There you go.
Now, if I can jump in here, and unless there's something burning needing to be said about questions 1 to 4, before we get on to 5, I just want to have a quick run through some of the statements that are here. So on page 2, the Uniting Church affirmation of faith. One of the things it starts out in a fairly conventional way. It starts talking about the things we believe, but towards a bit over halfway, it starts talking about we are a people, particularly a pilgrim people, on the way, and we receive the gift of the Spirit. But then the next one, the last paragraph it must be. We affirm that every member of the church is engaged to confess the faith, and we will serve the world for which Christ died. So there's a mention of something there that's not very often turning up in other documents, and that's to do with the way you live your life as well as the things you assent to in your mind. The Canada one on the other side there, it's a little bit similar. And I'm biased, of course, being Uniting Church, but in the basis of union, in the paragraph 3, the second part of it, it's talking about the renewal of the whole creation. That's the end in view. Da da da. And then it's got this line: the church's call is to serve that end, to be a fellowship of reconciliation, a body within.
Where is this?
There. It's basis of union, page 4 in the
Page
middle.
2.
No, the basis of union. Yeah, there. Paragraph 3 in the middle of the second paragraph, second part of it. Yeah. The church's call is to be a fellowship of reconciliation, a body within which the diverse gifts of its members are used for the building up of the whole, an instrument through which Christ may work. Now, even for a non-conservative bloke like me, they are some of the more inspired words to come out of the 20th century. And there's a whole lot of other stuff in other parts of the basis of union, most of which I haven't, there's not space to put there unless you want a document twice as long. And then there are the statements about the biblical witnesses and the creeds, and the basis of union specifically calls in the notion of academic scholarship in that paragraph 11. And then you get to the more conservative ones, like the Lausanne one on page, whatever it is, 6.
Which Christian communion did that come out of?
The Lausanne Covenant is an international, I think, document put together by a whole bundle of churches, but when you read the language and actually poke around a little bit, it has its origins and its inspiration in the USA, and quite obviously in a conservative thing. But I thought I'd throw it in because it has some interesting things to say, particularly...
Lausanne's a long way from the USA.
Yeah, that's right. Lausanne's in Switzerland, so why they use that name, I don't know. I'm intrigued, given how conservative their theology about Jesus and the scriptures is, with what they said about Christian social responsibility. But if I wanted to be really unkind, I might call it condescending.
It's still very fundamental. We affirm the divine inspiration, truthfulness and authority of the Old Testament.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, good on them, I don't know.
There's all that, yes.
No.
And there's only one Saviour, my goodness.
Yes. So most of us wouldn't go down that path. I didn't put it in there suggesting we should agree with it, just so you could see what's there.
One good thing I noticed, and there's lots of good things, but looking at more closely the affirmation of faith in the United Church and in the United Church Canada, only once on those 2 pages do I find the word believe. The second word for the affirmation of faith in the United Church is we believe in one God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Full stop. And all the rest are different verbs. We proclaim, we acclaim, we acknowledge, we affirm. I'm reasonably comfortable with those words.
I've never thought about that.
And similarly with the Canadian one, it's about proclaiming and stating. Oh, there is a belief in there, we believe in God.
Celebrating and loving and living in respect.
Yeah. Which I find a bit more refreshing. I usually join as views of fruits.
You know, in the modern world, when we use the word believe and believe, we understand it usually as a subjective, personal, intellectual thing, but a personal, subjective thing. But when the word believe appears in the New Testament, the Greek word, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, is pistis, P-I-S-T-I-S, and that Greek word in the New Testament is sometimes translated as believe or belief, but other times and it's translated as faith or trust. So in the New Testament, original Greek New Testament language, belief is not, in other words, not a merely personal, subjective, intellectual thing. Like I believe in the existence of the atom, or I believe that the United States is over there on the other side of the planet. It's a richer, deeper, more fuller thing. It's faith. So, for example, the Nicene Creed, we believe in one God. We have faith, trust, and a faith and trust is much more than is a much richer and deeper thing than a mere intellectual belief. And this is to the other point of what I wanted to make, is that what we believe, and I'm now using the original New Testament sort of richer, deeper meaning of the word believe, what we have faith and trust in is not a merely personal, subjective thing, a matter of opinion, because what we have our faith, what we believe in, what we have faith in, what we trust in, directly influences our actions and behaviour in the world. And our actions and behaviour in the world are about how we live together with other people. So when we're talking about a creed, it's not merely we see it now as sort of an intellectual assent to certain propositions, which in some cases, many of us don't want to assent to those propositions anymore. But, and this is the other aspect of a creed, is that it's the public thing done in community together. We believe together, and it's because believe also means more deeply faith and trust, and belief, faith and trust influence how we live together. So, and of course this goes back to the pragmatic thing of Constantine and the early church leaders wanted to pragmatically create real unity in the church, which on one hand you think, oh, it's therefore just a means to an end, but on the other hand, unity and peace and harmony in how we live together is vitally and centrally important to everything. Now, of course, the problem is that if it's then used to exclude people and to create a sort of orthodoxy, and if you're not going to go along with these things, rack off, or we might have the Inquisition and burn you at the stake or whatever. But if it's not used like that, but used to foster and build unity, I think it's amazingly important and vital. So if we can have both aspects, the deep faith and trust thing, because after all, what matters is that the things that we believe or have faith and trust in are actually real. I mean, if we're believing in the big chicken in the sky and expecting that to help us live our lives and save us from our own self-destructive urges, that, well, we're living in a pointless fantasy which won't work. We want to actually believe in what really is real.
Why didn't you use the spaghetti monster belief theory? Like, that's actually a real one.
I'm sorry, I tried out. I've tried all these things out. I did try the spaghetti monster first.
That's
that didn't work.
actually a belief.
Then the big chicken in the sky, and eventually I got to Jesus, and I found that Jesus worked. Jesus saved me. And now I'm able to live an amazing life because it works. I believe.
I think the spaghetti monster is a good one. I mean, if you're hungry, you can always chew on that.
Yeah. I've recently given up cereals, grains, and bread, so no pasta.
And you don't have to worry about a pastoral care.
Yeah, very good. Chicken.
So you've just been talking about, in terms of what's on the paper, question 6.
Yeah, probably.
And I'm looking at the clock and wondering whether you want to keep on talking or whether you want to have a cup of tea or whatever. Yeah, that's right. And there's two things I want to finish up with at some point. So tell me when we all need to stop. But I'm interested in question 5 as well. I mean, it's had a mention already, but we didn't spend any time talking about it. What about this notion the bigger your creed, the smaller your God. And alongside that, running parallel with it, the notion of a creedless Christianity, if that's even possible.
If a religionless Christianity could happen or could be a possibility, I don't see how come we can't have a creedless one.
I think creedless is dishonest.
Sorry?
I think creedless is dishonest.
I think I agree with you.
In the sense that I think we all have got some sort of a creed.
I mean, I'm not
It's
saying
just
it's a
sort of,
bad thing.
it's
I'm
the
just saying there's
axioms
always a
of
possibility.
what we think are important. I mean, in the sense of creedless that you hammer it, I agree that it's, maybe it's good to be creedless if it's going to be abused. But if it's what are these? We used to do these things, or these summary statements for organisations.
Mission statements.
That's right, mission. We should come by the board, I think, in recent years. But I mean, it's sort of it's got that concept of a mission statement. This is what we're here for. These are our goals. So that we sort of and we revise them too.
Yeah.
You know, mission statement isn't always the.
From my perspective, and like I've said before, you can agree or disagree, but from my perspective, even Christ alone is a creed. Jesus is Lord is a creed. And in terms of the bigger your creed, the smaller your God, that's a delightfully small creed that leaves huge amount of space for a great big God and a whole who is able to absorb all sorts of people into the community.
Discovering Jesus, valuing people and building community.
I've got a question. Does God have to be big?
Well, now there's a philosophical question. I think I better shut down the conversation.
Does God have to be big?
And that was going to be my point about the bigger your creed, the smaller your God. Because in actual fact, God made himself small and specific.
There you
So,
go.
and that's where
Just leave there.
the church had the whole issue about, is this tiny little small specific thing actually God?
And people hate having debates about that sense.
How can this one man out of all the billions
That
be
too.
God?
That's where life proceeds without creeds. And science has no creeds. It is very
Actually, there
it-
are
it-
oaths which is similar to a creed in the scientific circle.
No, science advances by being completely open to observation. And if your creed or your theory conflicts with observation, then you dump it. You only need one counterexample.
You think, in one sense, it has a creed that's called the scientific method.
That's what I was on about.
That's a kind of a creed.
It's a
Often
process by
abandoned.
which you.
Bit
My
like
point really
sanity.
is that I think we are deliberately limiting our human potential by hemming ourselves in with creeds. Why can't we be open in the way that Jesus was open? He was open to all sorts of things.
Simple.
He didn't ask people to believe before he healed them. He healed first.
I can answer that question on why we are limiting ourselves because we are falling by our first action of stupidity.
Oh no, now you're getting into belief. You know?
What's wrong with that?
Because I'm saying I don't want to have it because I
Okay.
want to have that freedom.
Agnostic, right?
Yeah, agnostic's not that good.
All right.
What have we done, Max?
It's
We've
very
had a long
simple.
conversation and I think it's been fabulous. I'll tell you a story
Oh, crap.
to kind of end with. One of the places where I started was the creeds drawing their status from the emergence of the councils of the whole church. And because we'll never ever have a council of the whole church, there will never ever be another one of these things that we can all agree will be a creed. I guess you all know that in most years, for example, the date for Easter in the Protestant churches and the Western Church, the Catholic and our Western European churches, is different from the date that's observed by all the Orthodox churches. And the reason for that is that Western Europe uses the updated Gregorian calendar, whereas the Orthodox and Eastern European churches continue to use the original Gregorian calendar that was not updated in, the 16th and 17th centuries. And there was a story last week about the Orthodox Church in the Ukraine deciding to shift its Christmas celebrations to go along with the West rather than the East. So even now that's a political issue. But a certain Orthodox official was asked one time why the Orthodox Church continues to use the original Gregorian calendar and not the updated one. And the answer was, it was a council of the church that adopted the Gregorian calendar in the first place, and only a council of the church can change that. So from politics making rulings about religious matters, which is where we started, we've ended up with religion making rulings about matters of science. Yeah. So I put in there, in my notes, geology, anybody? Evolution. We passed a church on the way in tonight with a big sign up that says evolution and unproven theory.
Hang on a minute. I think God partook in starting evolution, set everything together, threw it out, and gave it the opportunity to thrive in its own free will. Look what happened there. But after that, from that point of beginning of time of creation, evolution was part of creation.
I didn't intend to start a conversation with that. Just pointing out that some people still reject the whole business of evolution because it conflicts with their pre-existing religious understanding. The other one that's on the very back page.
So if I can just go back to your Orthodox guy, I mean, part of the problem there is that at that stage there was only one church, but we will never have a universal.
That's right.
Unless we talk about the World Council of Churches, which is sort of are the Orthodox in the World Council of Churches?
I'm not sure, but very, very large numbers of the more conservative churches are not in the World Council of Churches. They have an alternative organisation.
So we can't make a universal decision anymore, or change the previous universal decision with a corporate vote.
Yeah.
Damn, I was hoping that God was continuing to be a saint. I was going to chew on that for hours.
Probably still careful.
I threw this in. Maureen sent it to me, I think. Yes. Not for us to spend a lot of time talking about it, but just to make the observation. When Jesus was around, it was all about how you lived, and the extent of this believing business was just who you gave your loyalty to, basically. By the time we got to Nicaea and all the others, it was all about the academic and mental assent, and how you lived was just irrelevant.
A mental assent too. I'm already insane. How frigging insane should I go?
Yeah, well, anyway, so that's just to finish off.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Obviously, been a very.
Well, you've talked for 4 minutes, so that's all right by me.
And all the people who stay
Now,
away,
Max, can you flick on to the final slide, and we'll talk. Don will mention next week, I reckon.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
right.
Oh, okay.
Is it okay if we talk just here?
yeah.
Yeah, just to stress that next week there is a panel. I'm particularly interested in it because I twisted my wife's arm to be one of the panellists and she's never forgiven me. But I'm sure it'll be good because this is where the rubber hits the road. This is the centrality and relevance for the relevance of inclusivity. If we are truly a society, dare I call the church a society, but a body of people that is concerned with speaking to everybody and engaging with everybody, then the real test of Christianity is how inclusive we are. Are we real?
And we have talked about it in passing tonight. So
It should be a really good session. There are 4 panellists coming from different perspectives with different experiences. It'll be a much more, I think, as I said, rubber hits the road type of thing.
that'll be good.
Amen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Max. Well done.